Okay, so I suppose this is number 6 of our ATK meetings, and we're doing it every week. And not much planned for today, but we will go through a couple of reviews, maybe do the release of ATK together, look at some issues, and I wanted to touch a little bit on documentation as well. So if you guys have any ideas of what we could talk about, then feel free to suggest. And
Like documentation is a good thing. If you can tell us like if RSC
yes,
files
yes,
are
yes.
the one,
Yeah, yeah.
we can consider there also.
Okay, so Gaurav brought up this issue that it's basically when you set a never persist to the field and it's not appearing in the UI.
It just appears always as read only, and it
Yeah.
doesn't comes in the hooks also.
So I wanted to talk about the pattern. Let me switch this off. Pattern in general, how I think would be a proper way to report any issues. And I have been doing it and do the pull requests myself. And here's the idea. So you start a new pull request and you first add a test case which demonstrates a failure of an existing functionality. For example, you define a field as never persist, like this, and then you create a form and then you try to access this field and it's not there, right? So that's a test which obviously failing because never persist is not handled correctly. In this case, it's kind of difficult because we're talking about data, and you're saying like field in the UI, so it's an intersection of two frameworks. But in many other frameworks, this is the pattern I'm trying to do myself, and for anyone else, it's just a really good way to how to demonstrate that there is actually a problem. So you add a test which fails, and then you either yourself or maybe some other person can commit a fix into the same pull request or the same branch, which solves that problem, and now this newly added test is working correctly. So in here I see that you're modifying this, you're modifying this. I'm not actually seeing it that that's what is the issue and what does it solve.
So how do I add an like it's a data in UI, but the field to be presented editable or not, it's in UI. So where should I add the test? Is in UI because the problem is from the data, but the implementation is on UI.
Yes. So UI relies on models. I think get actual field, get fields. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. But somehow it iterates through the fields and checks which field should be displayed.
So this is in the field is editable function that I have edited. If you can see
Right.
that function.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so what I was looking at, you changed and you created data all.
So I just I have collected every data which is never persist or whatever. When I send to data or to our DSQL or something, I am passing the same what you are passing, but I am still collecting everything. So you just can scroll up a bit.
Okay.
Just yeah here. So here only. So it's line number 15455. So what you were saying? If it's never persist data or never save data, you are just continuing. So you're not taking that data into account. So this was not available after the hooks and everything.
So what if we just remove this? You would just take this
Well,
out.
if we take this out, the this field tries to get saved in the database, and the error comes from DSQL that this field doesn't exist in the
Okay.
databases.
Okay. So we're
So I
collecting
don't
this. This is what we're going to collect from all the fields, and then we will be sending that into persistence.
So
Yeah. So we're
persistence,
passing
we are
it
sending
here.
the same what you were saying, but I am sending in the hooks the data all, which is collecting the never persist fields as well as all the fields, so that even I have a field in model which is I don't want to get into the database, but I want in the CRUDs and everywhere, and before
Yeah.
say after hooks, I want them to be there. So
And
this is doing.
I say using before update and not before save. So I think the correct way here is that Okay, the before update and before save, they're kind of different. Before save is passing the model, so that happens before we collect the data. Before update, this is more low level, and you get the data which is about to be written to persistence. And the idea, you see, the thing here is that it is passed by reference. So if
Right.
hook changed any of this data, it will affect. So
So I'm doing.
by introducing a
No,
different variable
right.
here, you will actually break the backward compatibility because the hooks won't be able to alter the data as it goes into a specific persistence now.
Okay, I'm doing this in save also, like after save and before save and after save, down the line.
Yeah, so
Just
if
scroll
you're
down.
doing before save and like do m get and or actually do m field never persisted, this at least this worked for me if you do it like that.
It works on before save, but it doesn't work on after save, after upload, before update. It doesn't work on everything because, as you can see, you are just skipping that data to be gathered.
Yeah, well, like for data, we only contain fields that are allowed to be persisted, and I believe we're also skipping the fields which are not dirty. So it's I'm not
So
sure about that.
yeah, but I was not getting all the data that I made some fields in there, and I wanted to be on after hooks. I was not getting everything.
Again, I'm saying that. What? Right. So what I'm saying is that the purpose of this hook is to intercept the data which is about to be sent out, and because
Hmm.
there is a flag on the field which says never persist, it's illogical. Okay, it's not being sent to persistence,
Yep.
and which is why it's not appearing here. But still, even regardless of which hook you use, either before save or before update, you can always access the model like this, which is the first parameter to your hook, and you can access field directly from inside the model.
No, it's not available. It's not available. As you can see, you are not collecting that data in data variable at all.
Then it's something else. And for this, I'd like to see a test case. Yes. So if
Hmm.
you create a test case and it fails, then yeah, we can try and understand why it is actually failing. So
Hmm.
this way, I cannot accept this because it breaks backwards compatibility here,
I
and
understand.
I also changed and introduced like a extra duplication of data as well.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, doc. So let's see what else we have. Okay, I think that's Philip. That's yours,
Yeah.
and it has been here for a while.
Yeah. Sorry, I should continue working on my PRs.
So okay, I
Philip,
think
I'm also learning the PRs and everything.
Yeah, it's in this case, it's not the PR itself. It's rather reading the documentation properly, what is meant to be documented,
right.
and then
Okay,
understand it.
speaking of documentation, then I let me see. I think I created it
It's
in the
in
UI.
UI. Yeah.
Yeah, so I created this issue here, and it's just
Ah,
multiple people they create pull requests and they're not submitting documentation. I understand why. It's not easy to write documentation. A lot of developers are not comfortable writing documentation, and I respect that. And I can probably write documentation for some of the PRs, but I need to know what to document. Yeah, my regular process would be I would open up the documentation, we'll look through and see which topics have to be added, and I'll just look where to add them. and try to give some examples and collect information. So before actually writing documentation, I will have to do a little bit of research. And I know there were a couple of pull requests which have been merged over the time, which didn't have documentation in them.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're like, okay, we're going to add the documentation later. And we never did. So maybe just a matter of looking through pull requests, which recently were introduced. They have some information in the description. Sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes it's more. And just, which are the most important ones that that are not covered in documentation. And also maybe there are some other functionality which didn't get documented as well. That's missing documentation. So for me, it's really difficult because I'm not using documentation that much. I'm actually not using ATK that much at the moment. But
What you are using there?
yeah, I'm going to a vacation. So
Yeah, I'm seeing you doing cycling and lots of maps on the Facebook.
yes, I'll be cycling for 10 days. I have an epic cycle. And after I finish that, I'll have my laptop with me and I'll have some time to probably write some documentation. And if there is a list of things I can write on, I'll gladly review that. For example, that latest pull request with the Vue.js. I can probably do something about that, play with it a little bit. Let's see how it works. Oh, it fails here. Okay, it's installed.
So Romans, you can start working on some documentation, like some basic documentation is missing. I was using a model and based on some fields condition, I wanted a sum of something in the field, and I couldn't do that. And I was like on the GitLab, Gitter, I was suggested that I should go for the group report model. But I think a model should have some facility to like group by and something. That was not there.
Yeah,
I couldn't find it in there.
Awesome. You should mention that in that ticket.
Okay.
Well, perhaps we should open the same ticket for data as well. Otherwise, maybe data documentation stuff will get into UI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it's kind of lost again. I can actually help you definitely with documentation. This is something I can do. Yeah, so if there's a list, I will participate and...
Something looks broken here.
Mm-hmm.
No, especially if there's easy stuff to document.
Yeah, the CSS file I think is missing. Agile UI CSS is not here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I run release, it usually it will compile things. Okay. Yeah, so Philip, yeah, perfect. If you could maybe make some sort of a checklist, and I probably would start with Agile data and then moving into Agile UI. One thing I was discussing with Imans during the week, and especially, so he's doing a modification in Agile data. Now he was planning to do that contains...
one contains many, yeah.
Yeah, contains one many, and it is in progress. And we have this. We started thinking this is a conceptual decision in ATK data, and I think we need to do more of this. We need to think about ATK data in terms of how to fix an actual problem, but how should it work in the first place? And the thing where we kind of disagreed, or maybe we had a discussion, is about array persistence, and we talked about that last week. So when you saving data into array persistence, and you have a value, one of the field is date, and
that I also wrote. Yeah.
And
it's saved as an object.
it is saved as an object into array. But should array persistence do something about that, or object or not? That is the question.
So typecasting was not there, and array persistence should have typecasting for that things. That was the issue I faced, and I also mentioned it in GitHub. So I
So
am doing nice integration with Laravel of ATK UI and ATK data right now. Very tight integrations. We are using the same PDOs and everything like that.
yeah. So what do you guys think? I mean, I think that when we're storing stuff into array, let's see the persistence array,
Yeah.
then it should typecast the data field, but I'm not sure what it should store them as.
The date itself, just the date. Because when you go in the UI, when you load it again, it doesn't work because the JavaScript side on front end was expecting some date and it's getting an object. It can't convert. So and then there's some PHP error occurs. I don't remember the date error, but so it's always broken.
And the reason why this is a conceptual issue is because we have three places. We have model, we have persistence, and we have field. So we have three different objects which can technically do something about the format of data. And we need to understand where it should be done and how. Because previously it was inside the persistence, and not persistence array, but persistence itself. So the parent object, which is called just persistence, he was doing some typecasting as well. And so on a top level, what you mentioned, Gaurav, regarding the UI is a different type. So it's a UI persistence. So it might have a different rules regarding storage of the data.
Okay.
Maybe it could be like this. So when you store the model says that every field should be properly prepared for the persistence and change its value for that specific persistence. And then we can have ability to affect that in multiple places. For example, the persistent itself can say, okay, I have a special way how we store dates in this persistence. So if it's a date field, then I want to handle persisting of the date field. If that's not happening, or if that's data, if that persistence is not familiar with type date, for example, or don't have any special treatment of how to save dates, then we resort to the field itself. And field should have a fallback solution to how persist itself in the environment where the native is not supported. So, for example, for the date, it would convert it into like UTC format, which is a string, and would only use that if persistence doesn't know how to store date. For example, SQL persistence know, and other persistence probably will know as well how to store date. So that would be a fallback.
So I even couldn't find a documentation on that thing, that how I can manage persistence in model or something else.
There actually is documentation for that. It's called typecasting. And so one could attempt to save or load the record. No, it is. Oh yeah, there's actually, you have ability to define a custom as well. So look for your model, you can define a custom typecasting. So if for a specific field you want to have something different, that's possible. And we have supported types, which does include date. Normalize will convert date to datetime objects, so that's normalized. Yeah, so there are two processes. Normalize is when you try to set date to an incompatible value. For example, you have integer, but you try to set it to string, and it will notice it's string. It will convert it into integer, or the boolean. But then you also have typecasting, which is for a specific persistence. And the serialization is happening in that as well. I'm not quite sure what happens if you use model with a different persistence. For example, you have SQL persistence for the model, but you decide you want to store it in somewhere else, like a session or a cache. So what should happen there? It's will serialize apply or no? What's it's unclear. So I think it needs to be defined maybe a little bit, and that's why we are stuck with this specific pull request. Right. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So at the moment, everything's working as wanted, right? It's just so when working with agile data, there's and the models, no matter what persistence we're using, as soon as you have it as model in PHP, you have a datetime object for all of the 3 datetime fields.
Yeah, that's correct.
So the current solution is working. It's just storing it as serialized object.
Yes.
But in that case, we have to handle it when it loads, because yeah, Ms. Romans is right. On models, we have to take care of that thing because it's loaded as JSON object then, and it's just not typecasting. We get some error.
Is there a format? So if you store it in JSON, okay, stored JSON data must be text, but it means JSON can use as data format for a program. Is there a format for storing date in JSON? Anyway, so how about this? We agree first of all that for every single field, there should be a fallback method how to encode that particular field into environment which is not friendly. I mean, they serialize the value, so PHP will serialize in some cases, but it might not be what we want. So it probably is a last resort, and it probably can be used as a default fallback, but fields like date should not store like that, and instead they should use some ISO standard for date for dates if you are converting it. And the other thing, we probably should call array persistence. We should call it in such a way, or define it in such a way, so it stores the key value parts, and the value will always be string. Okay, so even if you're storing objects in there, it will be string, and that means
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
And so for example, let's say you want to export something as a CSV. In order to do that, you need to feed the CSV a key value pairs, but the value should be string, because CSV, it does support array hashes, but it doesn't support anything other than string. And perhaps instead of modifying the array persistence, we should introduce a new persistence, maybe like something like array of strings. Really weird name, but why not? Okay, array of strings. And then, if you do use array, the only requirement is that the array stores it somehow. But if you do use array of strings, that it forces all the types to be typecast into strings.
Well, in that case, we're making so much persistence, and we must have a typecasting system which should be in user's hand. If you are giving an errand like the thing which you shown me right now, if I can typecast, it's okay. If I can.
Yeah, and you usually can. So there is a method in ATK data for typecasting on the model. Typecast load row.
Yeah.
That's a method of a persistence. There is another one, saved row, and you pass a model and you pass the data, right? So the model doesn't have to be loaded or in any particular state. You just pass the data, and it returns another array of the data. So
But this is in persistence. But this is in persistence. So still, I
that's
have to like extend persistent array and create my typecast and use that extended class as in persistence.
so
In that
persistence
case,
will look in multiple places. It will first of all it will look inside the field itself. Okay, let me look. Yeah, there is actually could be a callback called typecast in the field as well. So, for example, when you set storing, we'll go over all the fields. Okay, mandatory. Okay, fine. Okay, so there could be a value of typecast for the field. If it's set, we will call that method. I think, or yeah, and possibly there is also serialization there. Serialization is not specific to
so
persistence,
what
it
is it
seems.
doing 205 and if typecast is something in the field, then what are we are doing here? Typecast save field.
This line looks. I don't really get it. Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, art field. So you could pass an array of typecast.
Yeah, I used that already. That works perfectly. Quite the example that
So what is this
is there
dollar
in the
encrypt?
documentation.
What is this dollar encrypt? It should be a callback or
Yeah, it's
is
callback.
value?
It's actually quite similar to serialize. How you serialize? So you can be a string, but could be a callback. Could be array of two callbacks. Yeah,
I
so
can show you an example if you like.
this is supposed to be the second line. So the first line is encrypt, and there's a comment. This have to be on the second line, but because of the formatting, it's hidden.
Yeah, the formatting is crap.
Yeah.
Okay, so typecast you can define first thing for loading and second thing for saving.
Yeah, and there is a method typecast save field, and so that's for a specific field. You have a field property and the value of that field that we're looking to typecast. And if this is set and is an array, we're using
Then you
the
are saying, yeah. 289 you are showing t is equal to f typecast 0 is callable, and then you're calling t as a function value of this. Okay, makes sense.
yes. So we're executing the method for typecasting. Null stays null, but everything else is being called on this one typecast save field, which is defined just.
That doesn't do anything, so it's okay.
Oh yeah, it doesn't do anything. Yes, but it could be defined.
You can override it if you want.
Yeah.
Very
So historically we didn't have different classes for fields. It was just one class, class which was called field, and it was quite dumb class. It didn't have any methods or anything, and the typecasting was done by persistence itself. So all if we look at the persistence SQL persistence, there's quite a lot of typecasting definitions in here. Yeah, so we're redefining this method and saying, okay, if it's date, if it's time, we do this. If it's an array, we do this. If it's an object, we do this, and lots of things like Boolean as well. So now,
I guess this could be done in array persistent array also. Why not? It's like if we are treating it as a database, why not?
what do you mean? Sorry.
Yeah.
We can do the thing in persistent array also. Like why not?
Yes, yeah. So I think it just never was done. So there's not much, to be honest. Yeah, so it's not defining any typecasting, but I think it should, and that's
So
what.
underscore typecasting function can be introduced in array, and we are pretty much done, so that we can use it like in database system.
Exactly.
How does persistence CSV do it? Does it have quite a lot of typecast rules, I guess?
I don't think so. It just fails.
It should, huh?
Yeah.
CSV persistence really should have these typecasting rules. You know what I think? Persistence array, you only use it internally anyway. As far as I can get, you only use it inside your PHP code. But as soon as it gets to the outside, like a CSV file, like with exporting stuff
Yeah.
over API, then it really matters that it has a sensible format.
Yeah, and
So
maybe array can be left as it is because lots of sense serializing data. For example, there is a persistence uh, session
yeah,
persistence. Okay, we don't have it, but
No, you pass session in persistence array as in
yeah.
data store.
And it works. It serializes data and it works quite well. So
yeah,
there's no issue there.
I
But
I've used array everywhere. Just the date was getting me something trouble. Otherwise, everything could be done fine.
yes. So yeah, but when it comes to typecasting, I think we need a new persistence. Yeah. So you see this doesn't typecast a lot as well, right? So what does it do when load? It doesn't do much. So
It
yeah.
doesn't do.
Though this one should really typecast the date fields.
so
So
you see,
you
you
have
know
a
what's going on is when you're loading the data from CSV, it comes in a string format, but
yeah,
because there's no typecasting in here, but you have normalization. So if you try to set a value to the string of for the date, it will
yeah,
automatically convert it, and
exactly.
so that works fine for loading from CSV. But for storing, it might be a problematic thing. Yeah? So that probably
Right.
is a bug.
Even in array, if we write if I edit JSON manually and type the date perfectly as a value, not as an object, this loads well, this does everything well, but when I saves it saves as JSON object. So that was the only problem. And one more thing, Romans, how you are like searching on Git like this, the files and everything.
Yeah, type T, like letter T. Hit letter T
So
and it goes into search mode.
which key?
T.
T, just T.
Yeah.
Uh, T, and I'm into find develop. It's loading, taking time. Oh yeah, yeah, that's cool.
You have more.
Okay, that's cool. Like I was like thinking like you have any plugin or extension
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. It's been out in quite some time ago. Okay, okay, doesn't matter. I wanted so while we're talking about typecasting, I also wanted to talk about something else, and this is export, because last week we talked about export, and I said, yeah, it will be better when we do typecasting of the array. But then I started thinking, and export is entirely different than
Yeah.
typecasting. So let me go to model, and I believe there are two types of export. Yeah, so technically you can get row iterator. So there's a method like that. And what this does, it asks persistence to prepare the iterator to go over data, but it will return a row and data which is, as it is stored inside the persistence. So in a way,
Mm-hmm.
this is like exporting data directly from a persistence.
Okay.
I'm using that. So if you do call get iterator, so you iterating over the model, it uses get iterator, and then it uses yield somewhere. Yeah, so it yields the
Yeah,
value. But before doing that, it will call the hook, obviously, and will perform the typecasting in here as well. So if you, for example, loading data from SQL, you will convert the date inside obviously date object. Then you execute this hook, and then it will continue, get iterator. Export relies on this iterator.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so when you do the export, let's see. Oh, it's quite a lot of it. Yeah, so it's
Okay. Wow. Whoa. Then why we are doing a lot of things here?
I don't know. Export data set.
So if persistence has method export, it should have been called here.
So there is export in persistent level. It probably should be different. So we could say, like, if persistence doesn't support export, we could just do it in the model. But all right, okay. And then we're going over the fields. Oh yeah, so we're saying, like, if we only want a specific fields, then
No, it's like model. If model has set only fields, so no matter what fields you define in export, it shouldn't get those. Something like that.
so fields will be an array of the fields which we need,
Yeah.
which will consist of required fields and the system fields. Otherwise, we'll just get all the fields except those which are never persist. So we collect all the fields we need. Array k field to array. No. Okay, we also need a field for, I think that's for ID. Okay, what is key field? Key field. Okay.
Key field you are
Optional
passing
name. I see. Okay. So yeah, I didn't know about that. No, someone else added. You can specify which field would be the key for the array, which quite cool.
Yeah, it's quite cool. It was a feature request I made.
All right. Okay. Cool. And then we're exporting. So we're asking persistence to do the export for us. So okay, it's not as I thought. So you will not iterating over the results of the model. We're not loading them. Instead, we're asking persistence. So let's see what persistence does. First, okay, this doesn't have it. Is that here? Okay. So that's a persistence array. It does have a field called export, and when you call it, it does action select.
That's probably how it's implemented in every persistence, huh?
Yeah.
Would be surprised if it was much different in persistence SQL.
Yes, and
what persistence SQL like?
Let's look at the SQL persistence first.
Right.
Okay. So it does select, and then it does array map. So it still calls the typecast. It will use the fields in here, so we'll select specific fields. We'll typecast
so
them.
Should be an array. Fields should be an array here.
Yeah.
Why we are giving array into array in select?
Fields is an array. Yeah, that's correct.
So array into why we are giving array into array?
What's wrong? Why?
Good question.
So
two-dimensional array.
Yeah, that's the reason. So when you call the action, you can specify the method, and then as you specify arguments to that method in here, and the first argument is list of fields.
Array.
Yes. But in some cases, you might have multiple arguments.
Yeah.
So that's correct. And then who's making this noise? And then once we have the data, we will map. So we'll get the data. So we'll actually fetch the data, all of the data, and it will map it through the function of typecasting. Load row. So yeah, typecasting, I guess it's still involved, but it will not execute any conversion. Sorry, it will not. It will convert. Yes, it will convert, but I misspoke. I said I wanted to say it will not invoke any hooks for like afterload.
Yeah.
Because the data actually didn't load, so it is slightly different. There could be actually maybe a hook here which is called after export. So which that would make sense. If you're doing something, you could do something about that. Also, so that's a export inside the persistence, and then you can also get the action of the select yourself and then call get. So if you know it's a SQL, that's a good way how to fetch the data. That's the fastest way how to fetch data from SQL.
Yeah.
So in terms of exports and persistences, maybe we could have a more direct way for fetching data from the persistence, bypassing all the typecasting. So it could be like, maybe we could call it like export from persistence, and then we will not do any typecasting. We'll just get you the results from the persistence. And in the case of SQL, you just get, essentially, you will get the value of this method here.
Because this export function was called on persistence, can we check on model if on export function if we are doing afterload something there?
You mean in here?
No, yeah, in models, like in model we do have export function. So once we load this model, what else we are doing there? Just can you please open the model
Okay.
source?
Model PHP.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the export function here.
Okay.
So it must be doing something after load also here.
So
no.
okay, once we have the data, it will, I think that extracts the key. That's it.
That's it. Okay. Yeah, it's not doing that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose, like, I know I suggested that there could be a hook which is called after export. I don't want to do after load on every iteration, but calling after export makes sense. So you could do something with data.
In case, Romans, there's one thing. You are calling export function on the model, and if you are
Yes.
calling the export function on the model, the person looking at the model must consider after load hook will be like doing the things because it's a model. Otherwise, I could have done on a DSQL level to export the raw data.
Yeah. Well, it's not called because we're not actually loading the model at all. Like if you think about what after load means, it means we're loading a specific row inside the model and then we're executing something. In here, we never load it.
Yeah.
We're just
Yeah, but
getting the data.
let's say I have a model which has some join with other tables, and I want to export all the fields. Then in that case, it won't be doing that thing, or will it be?
I think it will be because if it's a SQL, then remember when we looked at the export there, it creates a select with all the fields, and
Right.
joined fields they require. They will also make sure that the join happens, and but it still will be a single select in the SQL, and you will get the data from all the fields. Even if it's a aggregate field or an expression, you're still getting all the values.
Okay.
So that's still fine.
But my question is like if I'm doing some export on a model level, I would expect the models to be doing all the model can do. Otherwise, I want the raw data. I should do export or more on the DSP level.
I would say that if we add a hook here, which is called after export, and if you want to do any special treatment with data, when export is happening, you can use that hook.
Or
Otherwise,
I can call the same after hook function under that hook.
as I said, calling after load here makes no sense.
Okay.
But to be honest, you don't even need a hook. You can just override the export method and you returning array. So do whatever you need with that array. So I think that's quite simple way to override export.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just a model function. We can do other than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like whenever we code, like what I do, like I create an proxy function, proxy model class first, and then I extend from that class so that I can override a lot of things. So I do like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Can we check that if that release has been done, like how you're releasing?
The release.
Or
Well, I haven't had a chance
So
to
it
test.
did, so we didn't really come to a conclusion regarding the format of date fields and so on, how to store them. That's really
So,
tricky.
so,
well, my
Philip,
conclusion.
I found my answer like if you are having a typecast on the field itself, so I can do like unloading and saving there. So it's definitely a good way.
Pardon, I didn't totally understand you. It's your voice is coming in pretty low, at least
Okay.
at me.
So because on every field we have typecast that can have an array of first is like loading typecast callback and saving typecast.
Saving, yeah.
We can put it there.
You mean for the date fields?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, yes, of course we could put it in there for so we have it like in the fields. Yeah.
Right.
Still, the original way I came to this was that API still uses export and model get function, and so it'll still be there. Still be datetime object. So yeah, seems like we'd have to add some extra functionality to API then to
So
reconvert it back to string values.
what you can do is like you can create a date type field, extending the extend step by create a typecast function in there, and you can use that function. Like I'll also play with it now because I was also having the problem on date time fields and on array persistence. So I'll also play with that now.
Okay. Manual overrides.
Persistence, okay. And never persist and it's not editable.
Now I'm looking at Roman's text.
I'm also.
Yeah, sounds sensible.
I think that if, for example, there is a typecasting defined, we just go with that, and we skip everything else. So it's not that all four of them, but whichever
Yeah.
matches first, because typically that wouldn't be defined, and field might not have a typecast method, and maybe persistent doesn't want to do typecast that specific
Yeah.
type. So
But the
it's
parent
yeah,
persistence.
that goes to parent class by default. But then no, they can override. Also, array of strings. We definitely can use that because we can extend that and we can use it for persistence CSV
Yeah.
and persistence JSON. We
Yeah.
current for
Definitely.
okay, cool. Did we agree on anything else? Oh yeah, export. So export should have hook after export. Let's just do that because it's consistent, right? We have after load. We could also have after export. This way, Gaurav will not have to create a single parent for all the models. He can just use the hook.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we could also
So this after export would be on whole the data or each row.
that would be on the whole
Because,
data, on the whole
okay.
data set. So it's on entire. And then another method called export from persistence, giving you raw data, and you do whatever you want. So that's in a way might be a faster solution for a lot of situations where you just need to get something out of SQL, and I don't want to iterate over the data multiple times.
But in that case, like export from persistence is you are doing export from persistence and calling after hook. It's one of the same thing. Like
We wouldn't use that within any standard add-on or inside the UI because we'll never know what's inside the database. But this could be used by user. If, for example, Gaurav needs to do export of data in XML or whatever, and he knows exactly how this model looks like and what fields are, then why not use it? Why not use
okay,
this?
Okay.
What else? Yeah, what else?
So a question I have regarding performance. I noticed that I have quite a lot of data tests in one of my projects, and after updating from Agile data 1.5x to 1.6 something, and I hardly changed anything except for some minor changes I had to do to comply with the new version. I found my tests were running much slower, like 25%, 20 to 25% slower than before. Did anyone else notice something like that?
That's quite a good thing you noticed. So is it for ATK UI or ATK data?
Data. It's data.
So data has slowed down.
Yeah, at least my tests have slowed down after updating. And I'm not really into profiling yet. Otherwise, I would have done that already.
Can you try and identify which versions exactly? Because it could be some minor version.
Yeah, I know that's the problem. I think I updated from the last 1.5 version to 1.62 directly, as far as I know. So it could be 1.60, 1.61, or 1.62. And actually, I was wondering, one of you using some profiling tools. I mean, Xdebug can be used for profiling as well, I know. I had a look into that, but I didn't really didn't get into it that much.
So, okay, here's what I'm using, right?
Shit, that was fast.
I'm using profiling viewer, something like that.
Right. So,
so to view the Xdebug files.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing, right? If I do PHP, sorry, so P is a file which is a PHP unit with no coverage. If I just run PHP unit, PHP, then it's slower because it also records the coverage.
Yes, I know. I'm totally sure it's not from the coverage.
Okay, and so that's is that like a version? Let me see, change log 130. So because on this computer where I'm recording, I think it's older version 13 something. So if I update it to the recent, okay, so that's 14 something.
I was talking about actually I did something. Of course I was updating from the last 1.3 version to 1.4 something. It's Agile UI, which is on 1.6 numbers. I messed it up with data.
Yeah. Well, a good thing. So I did update the data, and previously it was 112 seconds, and after the change, it was 1.5
already. Yeah.
But I ran into some errors. I'm not sure what the errors are about.
Yeah, but usually the errors make the test faster because it makes the test stop before the whole test is run.
Or slower because they need to do like a deal with a expression. Yeah. So what I found in some of my tests, so if something goes wrong, like you have an exception
Yeah.
collects the debug informations, like a debug backtrace, and that actually takes quite some time. So
Okay.
if within your loop you throwing exceptions, you catching exceptions, this it slows down things.
So Roman, can you help me out here, because I just forgot, and I just by your conversation I got a problem. If you can quickly show me, if I have a model set it on CRUD or somewhere or something, how do I get the debug query? Like previously it was like arrow debug, and it would be nicely printed at the end of the.
Oh yeah, you
Uh,
mean the debug? I know what you mean. So there is a method I can show you, which gives you a really nice output. Um, okay.
underscore debug info.
Yeah, I think it was like get debug. Get debug.
Yeah, it's get debug info in query.
But this doesn't work on model. It doesn't work.
Right. So the way how we did this, we ran into some problems. So it's you need to show to display this debug when you're executing a query, and quite often in when you use agile data, we build the query, but we don't execute it. So it is also possible. So I don't really remember what the case really was, and I think the best way, if you want to do something with your queries, the simplest way really, is to simply do it on a SQL level, and I'll show you how. Was actually probably documentation. So when you defining connection, you would use something like MySQL colon.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what do you do? Like user at password. If you put
And
debug in
just
here
dumper, yeah.
or dumper, yeah,
Debug works too. It's dumper.
yeah. So
Okay.
I think it's dumper. There are two filters. One of them is dumper, and another one which it actually counts time, how much executions took place, and these are defined on a DSQL level, and they are proxies.
But Romans, in the case of like I am integrating it Laravel, I'm using the Laravel's PDO, its own connections. I'm not using the ATK's.
You can still
Uh,
use it because I'll show you how. So you've got yeah. So there's a dumper and counter, and you can define it inside your the connection string like this. So dumper or counter, and it will work. Or you can use it as a wrapper as well. So you define this proxy connection, and when you create it, you pass the argument actual PDO class or actual DSQL class. So you just wrap existing one. So technically, you can connect as you normally would, and then you can wrap by changing the DSQL value into this proxy value. Let me try and find something more about it.
One nice thing about the dumper is you can pass a callback to the dumper, so it doesn't output it to the standard output, whatever it is. So, but you can catch the output of the get debug query function and just log it somewhere else. I recently implemented this for my tests to
Yeah, that's
have
right.
a nice log of all the database queries.
I need to see it. Like I couldn't get it. It was too far
Well,
from me.
I can open some.
I
Yeah.
think it was actually used in a test suite. So let me find a test. Uh,
Damn it, where is it?
how we're testing it?
But
Okay, maybe
around
I don't have
my
any. Go on. Yeah.
my question is very simple. Like if everything is going fast, I don't want to go into dumper. Like I should get the query which is get executed instantly, like in my UI and data.
Okay. Okay. Let me get back to data then. I'll show you where we had some issues, and actually I think we did solve it in one problem. So I'll also open up the solution. I'll show you how we solved that. Right. So model. So we have this method which called action here, and the idea of the action is that it gets the returns something like this, like the SQL query, but as a mode, which that's sorry, it needs to be persistence SQL. Okay, there we go. Action. Right. So init initialize the query. Right. So init query. And Q in here. This is the SQL object in case of SQL connection. Then obviously you do something with it depending on that. You know, you need some init select query if it's count and so on and so on. So at this moment, when we're doing a return, we add limit in here. At this point, we're only returning the query. We're not doing anything with that query yet. So for example, if your model can perform some additional changes on the model, for example, some grouping and so on, so it can't be here. And this is why we need to have some sort of mechanism inside the SQL to output the debug execution of the query on a single connection level, right? So we have probably, I would say, inside expression.
So, but like if I have a model and it's object and I want with some joins and I want to debug the query, what's get executed inside behind the
Hold
hood.
on. So in here, debug. Okay, no, get debug query. That's not it. Yeah, so not get debug query. But I think we could add a new parameter in here. Actually, there's a trait for debug, so that we could on expression we could set debug to yes or enable debug, and then if the debug is yes, we could do something about this query, this specific query, as it's being executed, because there is a method
That's what
called execute. So at this in here, you know, as it is about to execute, this is the point where we are supposed to output the query, because until then the query can still change, or some things about that query can change. So only here we need to output or do something with it. Okay, now I told I'll show you what we've done. I think it was in some bill. I'll try to find.
how's SMBO going on? Like I guess you have converted SMBO on the DSQL and ATK data completely.
No, it's not. It's like stuck between those two. But yeah, Evans is working on it. Now I can't remember where the things are anymore in there. So PSR. It's shared. Okay,
Yes, sir.
it is inside shared.
You are using PSR3, PSR4, okay.
No, I'm not using it. Okay, so that's okay. It's called S2 model. S2 model. That's the class. So that's a global class, so we're extending it from data model, and then we're doing lots of things inside there. And we
Yeah.
do use a debug trait in here, and some other things. There are jailing in place, so you could set up jails, and we do have debug in here. Implementation. So you can call this debug trait. And okay, so hook, you need select query, you do echo at this point.
Can I print screen it?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That's the thing I was missing like hell, because unless I go to the action, I can't have that debug query, and in the model I couldn't. Okay, man. I was.
But listen. The reason why it will not work, and I was showing you before.
Should I print my print screen?
Yeah, hold on. You see the hook is in here. You need select query. That's the hook. Right. So whenever we reach this location, it will output the query. So obviously you will have limits, you will have conditions and everything else. But in some cases, when you're calling an action and then you're modifying your query a little bit more, for example, you add grouping, or you add extra join, or maybe delete some field or whatever, it will not be able to pick up those, so it will output a query to
But
you.
in this case, I can call get debug query after that.
It will show you the query not before the execution, but when the model produces the query. But the user can technically do more stuff to the query afterwards.
Yeah, so it should be inside execute.
Yeah, it should be inside the DSQL technically, but DSQL doesn't support callbacks. There's no hooks in here, right? So it needs to be in front of here.
Can I use this get debug query on the chain, like if the action has been done and I have done on the arrow and something like that, and then I can call get debug query later on?
Yeah, you can. I mean, if you have access to the query yourself, you can call get debug query at any time.
Okay.
And oh god.
And the funny thing about this is get debug query actually changes the query depending on just read DSQL 155. I spent 3 hours understanding why get debug query outputs me the correct query, yet the not correct query is sent to SQL. It really gave me the creeps, that one.
Do you mean that so you output the query and then something else modifies it, or calling?
No, get debug query actually modifies the query on certain conditions. It's
Does it? Which did you create?
Because it calls __ debug info, which I don't know if it's in there, but it calls render function of expression. And actually, you can just read 155. It's an open issue. My opinion is that render should be called one more time. It was quite funny. That's why I know these lines of code so well. Because I was like, get debug query outputted me the correct query, and yet I was sure, because the result I got back was wrong, that some other query had to be sent to SQL. So it spent like 3 hours not understanding what was happening, until I saw that get debug query calls expression render, which fixed my case. It's just I think Emans is on it.
But how do you fix it?
Pretty tricky.
All right. So if I understand it correctly, then rendering something several times produces a different result.
Exactly. Well, not. You see, I defined some expressions in my model, and so they run through the execute function itself. And their render is not called. Render is only called when the final complete expression with the sub expression get sent to DSQL, not DSQL, via PDO to SQL. So yeah, it's right. It was so complicated. I made a screencast with explanations to.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very, very tricky understanding this, and yeah, it's still an open issue, and I don't really have the solution for it. My understanding is that these subqueries should be rendered as well.
That's new.
Yeah,
so you're
I
sponsoring it. That's great.
yeah, I am sponsoring it because I want these subqueries to work because they'll speed up my application.
Maybe if we have, as Gaurav said, if we had easier way to debug queries, then we
Yeah.
wouldn't have to invent these callbacks and doing the query get debug query at all. So we could just get the final query and then display it as it was executed.
And
Yeah,
Thomas,
that would be great.
It should be a priority issue. I personally feel it should be a priority issue. Everyone using should have the things to get debug what's happening inside.
Yeah, it really should be in that line where statement execute is called. So really where the final expression is rendered and sent over. That would be great. Because yeah, that was really so tricky. Like you debug it and debug says the query is correct, yet the result tells differently.
Right.
So debugging should be it should be a tool. It's obviously a tool, like what's happening inside.
Yeah, I think actually all this debug stuff, especially together with testing, I think a lot of people implemented some of their own stuff for making testing easier and so on. Maybe we could join some of this code and move it to have more like a bit more of a testing framework for ATK, especially for ATK data. Maybe that would be some interesting topic for one of our weekly meetings here. Like just how do you test? What additional functions did you code to make testing life easier?
Okay.
Maybe would be something that at least would interest me very much because I'm a lot into testing. I really like it.
Okay. Yeah.
So Roman, can I ask you a question? What's the sponsoring process here? Like if I'm in a company right now, who can if we get stuck, they can sponsor. Like I cannot commit, but what is the process to get sponsor?
Sure, yeah. Okay, I'll explain. So the way how myself, Imans, and Alain are operating is that we are paying them like a monthly fee. So they're working on the reporting hours, and in exchange now we change the prioritization. So if there are any requests coming in from someone else who uses ATK as a framework in a project, and they see there's like a least painful issue and they can't solve it themselves, they want us to solve it instead. They know how to. So they either call us, through some of the channels. There is also like an email support @agiletoolkit.org, where you could just send an email, and they say, okay, could you solve this issue, and we're okay to pay for your time. And in this game, it covers some of the time for Alain and Imans and or maybe myself, whoever is available, and we will prioritize the solution of that issue. The usual approach is that people pay us for like 10 hours of work. They put this money, send it to us, and then whenever they have issues, they will just ask, and we know there is the money is prepaid, and because Imans and Alain, they don't deal with the financial questions. They just know that they are okay working on Philip because Philip has arrangement with Yuris about the payment.
So 10 hours and at the rate of
yeah. So it's 10 hours, and then there is a separate arrangement where you can get discount hours, but that means you need to commit on a monthly basis. This is what sort my books have with us. So every month they're buying certain amount of hours from humans, and they're giving him things to work on. So that in this particular case, it extends. It's not only ATK issues, but some other issues. But there are some clients who were paying us like for 10 hours a month, and the guy was coding and always would come up with lots of issues. So yeah, that's it.
So the charges of the hourly charges are what are the hourly charges we are?
I think it was like it depends, but depending on which one you use. So that's it.
Okay.
It's like 50 euros or so, or 60. I don't remember, but there are some discount rates if you get for the month.
Okay.
I'll find out for you. But usually, yeah, the people put it as an expense for the project development. No, developers not paying it themselves.
It is a development expense, so it's not something extra.
Right. And when we're working on that, we add the tag sponsored. So there are quite a few issues which actually not that many, but that's the SQL. So there are more in other projects, but the communication is ongoing between whoever needs that. Like the Oracle, we did a lot of Oracle work for this company. Who we don't work with them anymore, but they sponsored pretty much all the Oracle implementation, which is quite nice. We support Oracle now.
That's good to have.
Yeah.
So only I guess I got my debug things on board there, because it not only me, every new person using ATK would be requiring to debug like
Yes.
what's going wrong.
Yeah, I agree there. So we do need some.
And then I'll be asking something in group, like how to do group by and the things like I couldn't find the documentation. I'll ask my question.
Yeah. So let me show you what I've got. I think Zach sent you to look at the report add-on, and it really consists of. I mean, the way how I wrote it myself quite some time ago, but it was never polished, and this implementation of it is a little bit, I would say, not very pretty in some cases, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But you don't poke it, and it is fine. Probably we could do a new release, like leave it for historical purposes where it's used, and then create a new release which is better. The concept with it. Let me look at some tests. So you have model like a group model, where you can define one model. So you this is your group model, and you say I want to group by a specific field. But because when you're thinking about the model has fields, right? So when you're fetching the data from the model, it gives you an array which have to contain those fields. When you're grouping something, you come up with entirely different result. So it's some fields may come true, some fields will not. But for that reason, you need to have a new group model, and as an argument, you pass your existing model inside. Yeah, so your model will be invoice. You're passing it inside group model, and then you can do some other operations like add a field into this group model, or you can join this group model with another model, add expressions, and what else you can do is when you're calling group by, so first you define which is you're grouping by, so you're grouping by client ID, but then you define the aggregation. So you want a new field called amount, and that will be a sum of the same field. So if you don't specify, it will just create a sum of all amounts. When you fetch, you get the client, which was a field defined here. Add field client. You also have client ID, which was group by, and you also have amount. So amount is the aggregate of the sum of amounts, and it's a sum of amounts.
So I kind of agree with you now, because I was thinking like, why to have another model to just do group by? The model has all the facilities. Why I can't just do there?
Yes.
So
Well,
that
you
was
see
the
why.
question.
Because you have entirely different set of fields. And to be honest, if you create a group model, you can. It's a really good model. You can pass it into a CRUD, and
Mhm.
CRUD will display so all the new fields are they're fully working. It will show you the data. You can put it in a chart or a graph or table. Works everywhere. You can't do it with
And
the same model.
is it working model? Is it working?
Yeah, the group model is working well. So you see all those tests. These tests are working. You can do limits on it.
Okay.
Also, you can do more. The other model is called Union. And
I still remember that you made due to SMBO.
yeah. And to be honest, Union also supports group. So the way how we built it, it's we built Union which supports group, because when you union multiple models, you have this new data set which you can technically group again.
Ah, okay.
So it has a combined functionality. But sometimes you don't need Union, you only need group, and that's why there is a group model. So a little bit of overlap of functionality, but I think it's okay. So in this case, you when you're defining, okay, we have transaction. Let me see. You create a new model. I don't know where.
You-
Okay, yeah. Actually, I think it was done in the model itself. Transaction. Right. So transaction that extends union model, and then says
Okay.
it could be either invoice or a payment. So that's it. That's what all you have to do, and it will automatically pull the fields as well. So when you look at add name and amount, it will automatically move this field and link them up with the invoice. So invoice and payment have both a name field, and you can define it in this model as well. You have they have amount you can define here as well, and so
Okay.
on. But in some cases, you can define more than that. So you can define again joins, or you still have can have access inside those model on a low level, because sometimes when you add condition on a union, you want to add condition on the low level model first. Yeah, like add condition on the invoice and the payment, and that makes it much easier for the SQL to generate the data of your union.
That's pretty much good. That's good.
So I think this implementation is okay. It's not very documented,
But
but
it's okay. As
it
far as we
works.
can go.
Yeah,
So Roman,
it's a good.
can we have one session next time? Maybe like we can set an agenda so that we can gather more public here by showing the agenda. I guess because of the agenda, people will join more. Like we can go with the testing next weekend, and we can publicize it well before that. We will be having our next meeting on testing so that
Yeah,
people
next week
comes
I'm
here.
not here, so I'll be somewhere.
Okay.
Let me think what I'll be.
Yeah, I might be here too. I'm off to southern France for a week for doing canyoning, so I might join or I might not. I'll see.
Well, I definitely won't be here. So if someone wants to do the meeting anyway, fine.
Mhm.
But if we can skip the next time, again, it's okay with me. I can just
Yeah, if you're not here, I think 80K guys would be there.
right. Okay, I
Okay.
can ask him, but I think probably it's just safer to skip a week.
Yeah, why not? Then I'm totally okay with that. um, just to get back to the performance decrease, I think the test performance was decreasing on your machine quite notably too after updating. If I recall correctly, it was like instead of 1.15 seconds, it
To
dropped to
1.6.
1 point
It
or
was
even
1.5 and 1.1 to 1.6 seconds. I don't think, because we have more tests as well. So in here we
okay.
have 288 tests, but scrolling all the way up, it was 213.
Oh yeah, no, okay, that's
Uh,
much less. Okay, So seems
That's not really significant. I mean, if we would do something like major, that would be much more visible. Maybe the issue is inside UI. So in here again, like 5 seconds. Maybe that changed. Sometimes Emans did some changes to the rendering. So if you're running bunch of UI tests, maybe that was the case.
Yeah,
like
my
template parser.
No, it was really only data tests, but yeah, I will get into profiling anyway because I'm interested in it, and then I might find out where the reason is. Might very well be my code.
Yeah, I have looked into profiling myself. There was this tool. I don't remember what it was called, but I think some commercial company released it as a free version. And essentially you run PHP and then like you enable profiler, and it collects information about all the what was called, and you can have a tree.
How much time did it take?
Yes,
how much memory did it take? How often was it called?
Exactly, and it also subtracts. So, for example, we have a function called query, which calls some other functions, and it has been executed 500 times. You can see how much time did it take. Either per call or all of it. Also, this time doesn't include the time of the other functions have been called. So you can see time spent within that function and time spent within the childs of that function or subcalls. So you can really find what exactly that is slowing your application. And sometimes maybe it's a very small time, inside the template, some method is slightly slower, but because the method is called so many times, it have a much bigger impact on the overall performance.
Yeah,
but it takes time to debug.
Philip, I am using profiling viewer. If you can open on that. Roman,
okay.
if you can just profiling viewer.
And
It's a good tool.
And does it use the Xdebug profiling files, or is it an own profiling tool itself?
No, it opens your Xdebug files, and it gives you nice toolings and everything.
Okay, and how was it called?
Profiling viewer. I should Thomas, if you can open there if you're presenting.
I let you present. If you want to present, you can present.
Okay, let me. So, am I visible now, guys?
Not yet. Now it's coming. Yeah.
So this is profiling viewer. I'm using it like a lot.
Okay, profileviewer.com.
That looks interesting. Kiki, is it for PHP?
Yeah, I'm using it a lot.
Nice.
It's only for Apple, unfortunately. I'm running on Linux.
Oh, okay. But this if there are some web views also which takes the X debug files and represent the same way. There are some web open source views.
Okay.
It's interesting, if any of you can do some profiling, and if you locate any method in ATK which is time consuming, can be optimized, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, ATK is getting bigger and bigger, so the more chance there is that something's slow.
Anyway, guys, should we wrap up the meeting now?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.